Kurdish refugees in Nashville still struggle with the trauma experienced in their homeland. While some Kurds deal with health issues from physical wounds, many are influenced by the emotional scarring of surviving genocide. Mohammed Aziz, a survivor of Saddam Hussein's chemical attacks on the Kurdish city of Halabaja, still suffers serious health problems from his exposure to the toxic gases. After coming to the U.S., Aziz has found that the American healthcare system remains unable to meet the demanding needs of his condition. On March 16, 1988, Mohammed Aziz was visiting his family in Halabaja when Iraqi planes began bombing the city. They took shelter in their basement and waited.
At
about 4 p.m., we thought that the bombing was over and the planes had left. Those of us that had survived the attacks came outside to try to escape. We were still in the process of trying to leave the city when we noticed that the airplanes were coming back. This time, things were different. We could hear the rockets being fired into the city, but we could not hear the rockets exploding. When we came out, we could see the situation had gotten much worse. The scene that I saw after leaving my house was impossible for me to recreate. When I first came here, I saw the movie Titanic. The scenes where the ship was sinking and how the people were screaming and interacting with one another was much like the scene I saw when leaving the city.
Those who survived the initial attack on Halabaja suffered more tragedy as the mustard gas began to affect their health. As Aziz and other survivors fled to the Iranian border, they began to experience a variety of symptoms, including excessive sweating, vomiting, and blindness.
We were able to help some kids and others that had managed to survive get to the outskirts of the city, but as soon as I got there, I got very tired and my eyes started to turn red. I vomited whatever I had in my stomach and started to sweat a lot. Along with all that, I was temporarily blind. Of course, everyone else was experiencing similar problems. We were able to get about 2 kilometers from Halabaja, but then we all fell down out of weakness. Those of us that survived the journey were sent to Tehran, where we were divided up and sent to different hospitals throughout the city.
The most critically injured survivors were sent by Iran to other countries to receive treatment. Aziz spent the next several years being shuttled between countries and hospitals before returning to Halabaja in 1991. But Aziz was far from cured and his health continued to decline. Eventually, he was forced to flee as a refugee again, this time to Syria, where Aziz was offered resettlement to the United States.
As a human being, I am extremely grateful and happy because I was taken from a very bad situation, but all of my problems were not solved. Since that day until now, we have not been able to treat my lungs. 75% of my lungs are still damaged, and I am still trying to find a cure.
When refugees arrive in the U.S., they have access to health care for the first 6 months. After that period of time, they must find benefits through employment. Because Aziz's health problems made it impossible for him to work, he was able to apply for TNCare, but his doctor was unable to diagnose his problems, and the medicines didn't always help.
I was assigned to a family doctor who I explained my situation to. He told me that my particular situation demanded a specialist and that I needed to be assigned to one. My case was sent to Vanderbilt, where I was assigned to Dr. Millstone.
When I first met Mr. Aziz, I was not completely sure of the diagnosis, and at that time I put him through numerous diagnostic tests, including a test where I ran a camera down into his lungs to look at the lung tissue and to biopsy the lung tissue so I would be certain of the diagnosis.
Dr. Aaron Millstone, a pulmonologist at Vanderbilt, eventually determined that Mohammed Aziz was suffering from bronchiolitis obliterans, a chronic illness caused by exposure to mustard gas. Dr. Millstone's diagnosis of Mr. Aziz's condition received national attention when it was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Mohammed Aziz's diagnosis was the first of its kind in the United States. But the rarity of Mohammed Aziz's condition, combined with limitations of his healthcare coverage, have made treating his illness exceedingly difficult.
Most of the medicines that I'm using in Mohammed's case are temporizing. They don't cure the illness, they don't fix the underlying disease, but the idea behind the medicines is to give him better quality of life so that he's not in the hospital as much, so that he's not in the emergency room as often. The last year has been fairly good, but he does have a progressive illness, and certainly we have to do something above and beyond what we're doing in the future.
In the future, Mohammed may require a lung transplant, which is both costly and complicated. It is also possible that Aziz's body could reject the lungs after a number of years. But there is hope for another solution.
One day, the doctor told me that there is a new medicine that might help me. He said that this medicine is called gamma interferon and has been used successfully in Iran and Europe for treating others who have lung problems like mine.
There has been data out of the Middle East, mainly studies done in Iran, that have looked at giving the drug interferon for patients with mustard gas injury. And the data for interferon in the Middle East from these Iranian studies is quite good. It's expensive, it's investigational here in the United States, it's not approved by our Food and Drug Administration, and so Mohammed and I have been exploring numerous avenues to try and get him that drug.
I asked my doctor to see how much it would be if I bought it myself. He said that I would need $20,000 for just 1 year's treatment. My income is not that much, where I can come up with that amount of money so that I can buy that medicine.
The difficulty is that when you have an investigational drug that is exceedingly costly, it is very hard to convince insurance that the benefit of one individual outweighs providing medicine for 30 others with more common medicines that have been tested here in the United States. I don't have enough Mohammed Aziz's in my practice to warrant or be able to do a study here in the United States. And so I think it's a situation where we have to rely on foreign medical data to justify the use of this medicine in this individual patient. It's a real catch-22 today in the American healthcare system. What we really need for Mohammed is an ability to give him this investigational medication and be able to do it on a continuous basis for at least a year or two. That's really what it boils down to.